On this episode, I will be demonstrating the disassembly and reassembly of a standard 1022 trigger guard. First, you'll want to push out the pivot pins. You can do this with almost any thin metal tool, just make sure not to lose any of them. Disassembly is pretty simple. Everything seems to just fall out of the guard once the pins are removed. Let's take out this last pin here. Now the main reason I am doing this episode is because my safety spring for some reason dislodged while taking it apart the first time. It didn't allow the gun to fire. Apparently what happened was the safety button twisted and exposed the safety plunger, causing it to spring out of place. I had to come up with a tool quickly since I didn't want to end up with a broken gun before I even got to take it out and shoot. So to improvise, I turned a wooden chopstick into my own safety takedown tool. Just had to screw a little hole here, and voila, saved $15. So let's go ahead and carefully remove the safety. And I suggest laying out your parts neatly to avoid any chances of losing something. By now, you should have the disconnect and trigger pivot pins, magazine latch pivot, hammer pivot, hammer, ejector, magazine latch plunger, magazine latch spring, bolt lock, sear, trigger, bolt lock spring, trigger plunger and spring, magazine latch, safety disconnector, pivot pins for the trigger guard, and hammer strut. Alright, the first step towards reassembly is reinstalling the safety pin. Grab your safety spring and tiny safety plunger that came with your safety disconnector system and be ready to place it into the safety disconnect slot. We are going to use our safety removal chopstick to help guide and secure the disconnector. Keep in mind, it could get pretty stressful getting it done the first few times. Don't give up, it's a learning process. As you can see here, we now have the tool slot aligned with the disconnect slot. Insert the disconnector and press down with a tool similar to the metal stick I have here. Once the plunger is below the first hole, twist the safety tool till its surface secures the disconnector down. At this point, we are now ready to carefully install the safety pin. Remember to make sure the notched side is facing down in order for the disconnect to slip into place. Use the safety pin to push out the safety removal tool. And there, we reinstalled the safety system. Now let's work on the trigger system. Grab your sear, trigger, sear spring, and trigger plunger. Start by inserting the sear into the trigger and squeeze the sear spring into its slot. Once that is in place, use a slave pin to hold it together. As you can see here, you can actually make a slave pin out of a Q-tip. It's very simple and really cheap. This next step may be a little tricky. Get your trigger spring and plunger, then insert it into its slot here. Then, place your trigger and sear into the guard and align the slave pin hole with the rest of the pivot holes. You may have to play with the plunger and trigger to get it in. Now, just secure it with the trigger pivot pin. And cool, we are now done with the trigger and sear. Time to insert the bolt lock. Make sure bolt lock is placed in the position as shown, with bridge away from the mag release. Put a pivot pin here just to hold the lock in place. Here comes one of my favorite steps. Get the magazine latch pull and spring together and keep pressured when you insert it through its slot. While pressing down the pull, install the magazine latch under the trigger guard and release the pull so the latch can be secured like so. Now, you can finish this part of the process by finally pushing the pivot pin all the way in. Coolio, almost finished here. The bolt lock spring and hammer are needed for this step. Pair up the spring and hammer the way it's shown here and align the pivot slots in order to secure it with the corresponding pivot pin. If you did this right, your bent leg portion of the bolt lock spring should rest on this notch located on the bolt lock bridge. Slide in the injector pin on top of the guard and secure it with its corresponding pivot pin. But before you do, make sure the exposed leg from the bolt lock spring is pushed down under the pivot pin. If done correctly, the straight leg should be pressing up against the pin. I'm going to do it again here just to show you what I mean. Finally, last but not least, the hammer strut. The notch end here should be facing down when inserted into the wide slot located behind the trigger wall. This is another one of those finicky steps. Shouldn't be difficult though. Now have the strut end laying snug inside the back of the hammer and cock it back. If you would like to test the hammer, remember to not let it go full force. Cool, there you have it. We are now finished reassembling the trigger guard. It is now ready to be installed onto a receiver. If you are having trouble getting the trigger guard to fit into your receiver, sometimes the problem can be the bolt lock. You shouldn't have to take anything apart. As you see here, a little wiggling gets the bolt lock into its right position. Thanks again for checking out my channel. I really hope you can make use of this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down at the comment section below. Have a great day and safe shooting.